Welcome. Let's turn to the radius. We begin with the shaft, the corpus radii. This is a slender bone. Proximally it is more cylindrical, while further down it takes on a triangular cross-section. Of the two forearm bones, it is the more mobile one, shorter than the ulna. It starts slightly lower proximally, but at the wrist it reaches a little farther. All directional terms are understood in the standard position, with the palm facing forward. Moving down to the distal part, the pars distalis radii broadens considerably. On the dorsal side it is gently convex, and longitudinal grooves can be seen for the extensor tendons, the sulci tendinae. In the center there is a small puller-like elevation, the tuberculum dorsale, which guides the extensor tendons as they change direction. On the lateral edge, toward the thumb side, projects a strong process, the processus styloideus radii. On the medial side there is a crescent-shaped notch, the incisura ulnaris, which receives the head of the ulna. The entire distal articular surface for the wrist is the facies articularis carpi, an oval, shallowly concave surface that articulates with the carpal bones. At the proximal end we find the head, the caput radii, a small disc-shaped structure covered with cartilage. On its top lies the fovea capitis, which articulates with the capitulum of the humerus. Around the margin runs the smooth, circular surface of the circumferentia articularis, which articulates with the radial notch of the ulna and allows pronation and supination. Beneath the head is the slender column radii, the neck of the bone. On the anteromedial surface below it is a rounded roughness, the tuberositus radii, where the tendon of the biceps muscle attaches. Now let's review the longitudinal borders and surfaces of the radius. The anterior edge is the margo anterior radii, which defines the anterior contour of the shaft. Next to it lies the anterior surface, the facies anterior radii, a smoother, slightly concave area where the anterior forearm muscles run and attach. The intermediate, medial edge is the margo interosseous radii. This is the sharpest border, since the interosseous membrane, the membrana interossea, is anchored here between the two forearm bones. The lateral surface, the facies lateralis radii, is more convex. It is broader proximally, and then narrows as it approaches the styloid process. The posterior edge, the margo posterior radii, is less sharp but leads directly to the dorsal grooves. The posterior surface, the facies posterior radii, is convex. Here lie the sulci tendinae, which divide the extensor tendons of the hand into separate tracts. The tuberculum dorsale gives them a guiding change in direction. A special point to highlight is the articular surface toward the scaphoid, the facies articularis scaphoidea radii. This is the larger, lateral compartment of the distal articular surface, which contacts the os scaphoideum and transmits most of the load to the wrist. In contrast, on the medial side we find the incisura ulnaris, the notch for the head of the ulna. This forms part of the distal radio-ulnar joint, which together with the proximal connection allows the rolling, gliding movement of forearm rotation. Now let's continue with the detailed features of the radius. At the top of the radius we see the caput radii. This is a disc-like head covered with cartilage, which provides rolling, gliding movement from the elbow side. In the center of the head lies the depressed socket, the fovea articularis capitis radii. This articulates with the capitulum of the humerus and bears the load at the elbow joint. The margin of the head is encircled by a smooth cylindrical surface, the circumferentia articularis capitis radii. This connects with the radial notch of the ulna and with the annular ligament, the ligamentum annulaire, keeping the head in place while allowing it to rotate freely during pronation and supination. Beneath the head comes the slender constriction, the column radii, which links the head to the shaft. On the anteromedial surface, immediately below, rises a mound-like roughness, the tuberositus radii. Here the tendon of the biceps muscle attaches, transmitting flexion force into the bone. From here we move down toward the shaft, then reach the distal region. On the dorsal side rises the tuberculum dorsale radii, a small but important guiding pulley where the tendon of the extensor pollicis longus changes direction. Alongside it run longitudinal channels, the sulci tendinum extensorum. These arrange the dorsal hand tendons into separate tracks, so the dorsal surface of the radius functions like an organized system of grooves. On the lateral edge, toward the thumb, stands a strong projection, the processus styloideus radii. This is a palpable landmark on the outer side of the wrist and serves as an anchoring point for the ligament system. The distal articular surface facing the wrist is the facies articularis carpi, divided into two characteristic compartments. Medially lies the facies articularis lunata radii, which articulates with the lunate bone, the os lunatum, and transmits a significant share of load. Laterally, the facies articularis scaphoidea radii joins the os scaphoideum, transmitting most of the load into the carpus. On the distal medial side is a crescent-shaped notch, the incisura ulnaris. Here the head of the ulna fits. This surface works together with the proximal connection to provide the rolling, gliding rotation of the forearm. To summarize, proximally, the head with its fovea and circumferential articular surface form the connection at the elbow. Below them, the neck and the tuberositis mark the biceps attachment. Distally, on the dorsal side, the tuberculum dorsale and the longitudinal tendon grooves guide the extensors. On the lateral side, the processus styloideus provides a landmark. At the wrist, distinct articular surfaces for the lunate and the scaphoid transmit load, while medially the incisura ulnaris receives the ulnar head. This completes the chain of anatomical landmarks of the radius from proximal to distal.